picture story of the United States. A new century and new inventions. In 1900, the horseless carriage was a novelty, a rich man's toy. Get a horse! But in a small machine shop at Dearborn, Michigan, trying to build a better one, Mr. Ford? I'm trying to build a cheaper one for everybody, but I need more room. Henry Ford got more room for a moving belt, on which the parts of a Tin Lizzie could be swiftly assembled. By 1914, a new one every hour, and you pay your men $5 a day? Yep, high wages, low-cost product. That's my motto. Ford's system revolutionized American transportation and American economy. It meant more goods at lower prices, better paid workmen to buy those goods, a higher standard of living. Workers could buy stock in the companies that employed them, and thus become capitalists themselves. Meanwhile, in another machine shop at Dayton, Ohio, don't your boys make bicycles anymore, Mr. Wright? They're too busy with their crazy flying machine. Orville and Wilbur Wright built their machine, the first to contain a motor after long study of European experiments. They assembled it on a sandhill near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Then, on December 17th, 1903, hooray, it flies! You mean it flew. The first flight lasted only 12 seconds, but those 12 seconds marked the advent of the modern airplane. In 1912, a new president was elected, in contrast to the era of big business and material progress. Woodrow Wilson was a scholar and philosopher, formerly the president of Princeton University. But the quiet scholar proved himself a fighting reformer. We must abolish even the semblance of privilege. Banks must be the instruments, not the masters, of individual enterprise. Under his new Freedom administration, banking was overhauled, tariffs lowered, trusts regulated, working hours reduced. But a heavier responsibility awaited Woodrow Wilson. In 1914, extra, read all about it. War in Europe, England, France allied against Germany. Extra. Oh well, it's none of America's business. Popular opinion favored the Allies, especially after a German U-boat sank the Lusitania. More than 100 Americans were lost, but most people hoped the United States would not be drawn in. After Wilson obtained a pledge from the German Kaiser to limit submarine warfare, he was reelected in 1916 as the peace president. Win with Wilson. He kept us out of war. What peace? But in January 1917, Germany announced resumption of unrestricted submarine action. In 2 months, 8 American ships were sunk. On April 2nd, 1917, Wilson appeared before Congress. German submarine warfare is warfare against mankind. We accept the challenge. The world must be made safe for democracy. Thus, by action of Congress, did America enter the First World War. American industry, labor, and agriculture, the mighty partnership, poured forth arms and supplies, sorely needed by the Allies. After 3 years of struggle and sacrifice, great convoys of troops followed. As the doughboys streamed into France, an American officer visited a tomb near Paris. Lafayette We are here. By summer of 1918, 1 million Americans were in the trenches beside their hard-pressed allies. At Chateau Thierry at Belleau Wood, they joined the French in hurling back the German advance on Paris. That autumn, their drive through the Argonne forest to the Meuse helped to bring about a general German retreat. Meanwhile, Wilson had proposed 14 points for a just peace. They included freedom of the seas, free trade between nations, self-determination of peoples, a League of Nations. On the basis of the 14 points, Germany asked for an armistice. The armistice was signed on November 11, 1918, all over America, as in New York's Times Square. People celebrated the conclusion of the war that they had hoped would end war forever. Wilson, architect of peace, was due for disappointment. At the Versailles Conference, he was obliged to yield to demands of the Allies, who had suffered far more than America, for severe retribution against Germany. At least, gentlemen, we all agree on the League of Nations. Yes, President Wilson, we all agree on that. The bitterest blow was yet to come. In Wilson's own country, the American Senate, fearful of entanglements, rejected the League. In desperation, Wilson appealed directly to the people, making speeches throughout the country. In Colorado, tired and worn, he suffered a stroke, from which he never recovered. In the election of 1920, Wilson's Democratic Party was badly defeated. This was the first election in which women had the long-sought right to vote. Warren G. Harding was elected with his slogan of "Back to Normalcy." Though Harding had opposed the League, he called a great disarmament conference of European and Far Eastern nations. Secretary of State Charles E. Hughes presided. The only way to disarm is to disarm. The United States agreed to scrap 30 battleships. Other nations gave similar pledges, and the conference was hailed as a long step towards lasting peace. Meanwhile, the country was in the mood to forget war, to forget the rest of the troubled world. Back to normalcy was the sentiment of the day. The post-war 20s. After a period of post-war adjustment, the United States entered an era of unprecedented prosperity. It was also a time of ferment in the arts. The music of George Gershwin and other Americans became world famous. Novels by Sinclair Lewis, Ernest Hemingway, and F. Scott Fitzgerald were among the most popular of the period. The pioneer spirit was far from dead. In 1927, a young aviator, Charles A. Lindbergh, took off alone in a small airplane to cross the Atlantic. Lindbergh's daring flight from New York to Paris helped pave the way for modern commercial air travel. Look, there he comes! It's Lindy! He made it! Rapid development of radio techniques and sound movies ushered in a new era in the field of mass communications. Meanwhile, the nation's prosperity was not all it seemed to be. It was not shared by many farmers, and others who thought they were prospering were doing so only on paper. It's a good crop, but it may not pay me to market it. Finally, in October 1929, stock market collapses. This means my business is ruined. My life savings are wiped out. When the stock market crashed as part of the worldwide depression, wages and prices fell, exports dropped, and manufacturers reduced production. Unemployment spread. Herbert Hoover, a man with vast experience as a relief administrator in Europe, had succeeded Calvin Coolidge as president. He recognized the government's responsibility for the national economic welfare. His administration created the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to aid business. It brought farm surpluses and began public works programs. But the economic sickness was worldwide. The 30s and the New Deal. In these troubled times, the American people voted for a change. The election of 1932 brought the Democratic Party into office under a new president. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Franklin D. Roosevelt, a distant cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt, and his New Deal administration assumed emergency powers to deal with the Depression. Within 100 days, bank deposits insured, unemployed to be fed and clothed, huge public works launched, thousands of jobs to be created, aid granted to farmers, forced sale of farms halted. The Civilian Conservation Corps put the unemployed young men to work in the nation's forests. I've never been this far from a city before. Neither have I, but I like this. I'll be able to finish college thanks to this laboratory job, and I'm earning enough money here to help me pay my way through medical school. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, gave employment to skilled and unskilled in many fields. Funds were also made available for highway construction, housing, slum clearance, and education. All helped provide employment. Another government project was a mighty series of dams in the Tennessee River Valley, TVA, to control floods and provide electric power for thousands of farms. The nation was beginning to emerge from the Depression. Factory wheels whirred again. Wheat billowed across the plains. Then, from across the sea, came an ominous thunder of a new storm. September 1939. Hitler invades Poland. England, France declare war on Germany. Again, most Americans favored the Allies. The fight against fascism is everyone's cause. A Nazi victory would threaten the whole world. Nevertheless, America must stay out of this war. Roosevelt devised lease lend, whereby arms and planes were sent to hard-pressed allies. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. The people had backed Roosevelt's policies by electing him to an unprecedented third term in 1940. Meanwhile, Hitler's legions had conquered France and turned against Russia, and Japan had already joined Germany and Italy in the Axis. In August 1941, Roosevelt met England's Prime Minister Winston Churchill somewhere in the Atlantic. From their historic meeting emerged the Atlantic Charter, which echoed Roosevelt's proclaimed four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, freedom from want. Many Americans feared that aid to the Allies was drawing the country unnecessarily into war. Then, on December 7th, 1941, Japanese planes attacked the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Damage was enormous. Now, Germany and Italy declared war against America, and America, which had been forced overnight into grim, determined unity. Once more, American industry swung into action. Women, youths, older men went to work. A week ago, I was a waitress, and I was a housewife. Meanwhile, Japanese had engulfed American forces in the Philippines. At Corregidor, your boat is waiting, General MacArthur. I must obey orders, but I shall return. Dark months followed. Then, late in 1942, a great American army landed in North Africa, joining British and Free French forces. They swept into Italy. In the Pacific, slowly, painfully, island after island was wrested from the Japanese. And now, in England, there was assembled the greatest army the world had ever seen. This force, predominantly British and American, but including many other nationalities, was placed under the command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. As Russian armies in the east turned back the Nazi onslaught, Eisenhower prepared for a frontal assault on the enemy's mighty West Wall. In June 1944, British and American forces under General Eisenhower poured across the English Channel into France. Headed by Free French troops, the Allies marched into Paris, and, after months of bitter fighting, pressed into Germany itself, where they met Russian forces from the east. The great struggle was almost over. As Germany tottered, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Soviet Premier Stalin met at Yalta on the Black Sea early in 1945. There, Stalin agreed to join the war against Japan in return for territorial gains in the Far East. Franklin Roosevelt did not see victory. Soon after his return from Yalta, he died. All over the world, millions mourned. A month later, on May 8th, Germany has surrendered. At last, thank God. Now, the new president, Democrat Harry S. Truman, faced a terrible decision. Allied scientists in the United States had finally achieved control of atomic energy. Should it be used against Japan? Truman decided that the dread example would shorten the war, saving many times the lives that it would take. In August, single atom bombs were dropped on 2 Japanese cities. Two weeks later, aboard the battleship Missouri, Japan's surrender was accepted by General MacArthur. The Second World War, fought to preserve the freedom of all people, was over. The end of the war found 51 nations drawn together in a common cause, meeting at San Francisco to form a permanent organization, one that would promise lasting peace, that would bring the benefits of progress in all fields to suffering mankind everywhere. The United Nations had been born. Today, many people believe that the United Nations has failed to live up to its promise, and that it is much more a cause of strife and division than it is a force for peace. Once more, Americans might give thanks, as their forefathers had given thanks, in the wilderness of a new world, for the blessings bestowed upon their land, for the preservation of their freedom, which had brought their nation into being and, through the years, had been its guiding light. There is no point at which a living nation's story ends. Even as the pen is lifted, some great event may be taking place. Since this small book was begun, for example, the country has chosen a new president, Dwight Eisenhower, whom you have met in these pages. It seems fitting, then, to close the story of America with the founding of the United Nations, the end of war's long night, and the dawn of a new day, bright with man's hope. There have been disappointments and disillusionments, but the great hope still remains. This story has been one of quest for opportunity, for material happiness, quest for better ways of doing things, and above all, quest for freedom, freedom of mind and spirit, for all men created equal in the sight of God.